Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of In the Spotlight. I'm Mike Kenichi, and I'm really excited today because since the early 90s, I've been a fan of today's guest. He's known for many things, but when I first got introduced to who he was, it was on a great show called Picket Fences, which I really loved, and I can't wait to talk about. But he's done so many other things. He's the infamous bully on Hey Arnold, the one and only Harold. Who could forget Eerie Indiana, which was another great show? He's an actor, a writer, producer, voice actor. He's the one and only Justin Shenkarow. And Justin, thank you for coming on today. It's a real honor for me.
Oh, thanks so much, Mike, for having me on the show. And I got to throw out a little Harold just to get going. Hey, Mike, it's Harold.
That's great. So, Justin, I think the first thing to ask you is, and I asked a lot of former child actors this, how did you decide, like at a young age, you wanted to be an actor? Was it by accident? I mean, was it something? There's always usually a cool story behind everybody's journey.
That's a great question. Well, actually, my parents had a little bakery in Los Angeles, and I used to go in there, and I was there all the time when I was real little. And customers would come in, and I had big curly hair, and I guess they thought I was cute. I don't know why. And they kept telling my parents, "Hey, your son, he should start acting. You should get him an agent." And I think they heard it for quite a while until they finally thought, well, let's get him an agent and put him in acting class and see if he likes it. And I really enjoyed it. I started going to acting class and auditioning for commercials. And a year and a half later, I booked my first commercial for Mattel where I was flying in a harness. And then there was a craft service table with unlimited candy and chips. And I thought, this is amazing. So that's how it began.
And it's funny, Justin, because so many actors, when they start out, they do commercials. And I mean, I always think of, I was a big fan of Family Matters. I love the Steve Urkel character, and Jaleel White. He was in so many commercials at a young age. So really it gets you that foot in the door, and doing commercials is something that's very beneficial to inspire an actor because it gets you noticed.
Absolutely. No, I think the journey for a lot of actors begins with commercials. And then it seems like from commercials, you start getting into doing guest appearances on television shows. Then maybe you book a reoccurring on a TV show. Then finally, you may become a series regular. And then you start jumping into movies. That's kind of the traditional journey of a lot of actors. Of course, all of that formula can be broken. But for, I'd say, most of the working actors and the folks who have been in the business for a long, long time, that's kind of how they got started.
No doubt about it. And Justin, you came at a time where I just felt like there was no better time to be an actor as a young kid than in the 90s. I mean, the 90s exploded with TV, with, music, everything you could think of. I mean, it really took off. So you kind of came at a time right when, like, it was such a great opportunity to be a young child actor.
I totally agree. In fact, I even have a podcast myself, like you, and it's called Established in the 90s, where we relive those great 90s times in that era. I think of the 90s as the best decade ever. I mean, it was just such a wonderful time. It felt, we could be real kids where we were biking around to our friends' houses. We could be out late at night, and we weren't bombarded with, 24-hour news cycles of the scary things that are happening on a daily basis. And you're right. It was kind of a bit of the golden explosion of television and music. You had MTV with music videos. You had Nickelodeon with all these great cartoons, Disney with all these amazing cartoons, and just starting to happen more and more channels and great kids content. So it was a blast and a blessing to be working a lot in the 90s as a kid actor, and just I had an amazing time. So many fun sets, incredible crews and casts and directors and writers. It was a blast to be working a lot in that era.
No doubt about it. And Justin, one of the first few guest spots you did was on a great show called Who's the Boss, which I really loved. I think you played Jason, if I'm not mistaken. That was either 1989 or 1990. Just talk about that, because I mean, one of your first big breaks, and you're doing a show with Tony Danza. I mean, it can't get any better than that. Alyssa Milano. I mean, talk about that a little bit.
That was great. I actually tell you a little quick anecdote about the audition process. I remember it. I remember I was in the callback. So when you audition for a television show like a guest spot, you have typically a first call where you meet with the casting director. And then if the casting director thinks you're good enough, then they put you up for the callback. And the callback is where you'll meet the director of that episode and a few of the producers and the casting director again. And I remember there was a girl who had gone in before me because they were auditioning boys and girls for different parts for the callback. And I kind of had a crush on this girl. And I remember she came out and she was telling her mom that she really felt like she booked that part. And I thought, man, I've got to get this part because I want to be on set with her because I had a crush on her. And fortunately, I got the part. So we got to work together, which was a lot of fun. And she was an amazing actress. But even more cool was obviously working with Tony Danza. He was so nice, so wonderful. In fact, when we wrapped that episode, because it was a sitcom, so we'd work the entire week, at the end of the week on Friday, he actually gave me a gift. He gave me, I think it was like a little Sony Walkman, which were really popular back then. So, I mean, what a generous, wonderful actor, so gracious, because as a guest spot, you're just there for 1 week, but he wanted to make sure we felt super included. And it was such a warm set because he set the tone and he gave us a gift at the end of the week. And he was wonderful. Alyssa Milano was great. And Judith Light was fabulous. In fact, in the episode that I was in, Tommy Lasorda was like the big kind of famous guest star. And he, at the time, was the manager for the Dodgers, who had just won the World Series. So it was a really, really fun set to work on that week. And I have the fondest memories from it.
Yeah, I mean, and that was a tremendous show. I think it was on 8 or 9 years. So it was on a very long time. And then another show that you were on, and you were on it right in the beginning of its inception, was The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. I mean, I think you were on maybe the 7th or 8th episode of season 1. So just talk about that experience, because again, I mean, you're talking about Will Smith and even Alfonso, he had done Silver Spoon. So you had some established actors, musicians on that show.
Absolutely. No, it was great. I remember working on it. Again, funny enough, with that episode, just like with Who's the Boss, Tommy Lasorda was kind of the famous guest star. In the Fresh Prince episode that I was in, the big famous guest star was Evander Holyfield, who had just won the heavyweight championship of the world. So he was like very, very famous at the time. In fact, I always remember that he showed up on set in a full black leather suit, which I thought was so cool because here I was, this little kid meeting the heavyweight champion of the world in a full black leather suit. He had black leather pants, a black leather shirt, black leather shoes, and a black leather blazer. And I thought, wow, that is cool. And of course, Will Smith at the time had been like a famous kind of hip hop artist and then had transitioned into becoming the star of the show. But, he wasn't a superstar, of course, that he is now, but he was the star of this NBC show. And then Alfonso, and I believe the dad on the show, I believe his name was James Avery, who was a wonderful actor. And it was just a great set. It was a lot of fun being there for the week. And again, it was a gracious set, really warm, wonderful, and a lot of fun to work on. I was there for a week and I remember it fondly.
Right. And it's great that you had a wonderful experience with some of these guest spots, because I always think about this too, Justin. When you're guest starring on somebody's show, they're working together all the time. You're kind of what I call visiting the set for a week or two, whatever it might be. And I always feel like that could be a little intimidating sometimes. So, I mean, it seems like to me, though, both experiences with Who's the Boss and Fresh Prince, the cast really made the guest cast feel very welcomed.
You're right. They totally did, Mike. And you're absolutely right about, as a guest star, you can very much feel like a fish out of water because you're walking into almost like a family type of setting, especially if the show's been on for a while. These actors have worked together. They know each other very well. The crew knows the actors very well. They have kind of a shorthand with each other, and they have stories to share and inside jokes, and you don't know any of that. And so you're walking in, and it can be intimidating. You're working with, actors who may be somewhat famous at the time, and you really want to make sure you do the best you can and add to the experience and really bring, your wonderful acting skills and elevate that episode. But I was very fortunate. All the sets that I worked on were wonderful. And and it was a blessing, really, truly, because obviously there are sets that are not so wonderful, where there's, you know, issues or animosity or tension, and, you know, the guest stars of that episode really feel that. But I never went through that. I was very lucky.
Yeah, most definitely. And we all know about Hey Arnold and all the voice acting work he did on that show. But ironically, in 1991, I believe your voice acting career kind of began with a show called Pro Stars. I think you were on at least 14 episodes of that. So just talk about that, because a lot of people may not realize this, but you were doing voice acting in the very beginning of your career.
Yeah, I was fortunate. I mean, what an amazing series with all these incredible star athletes. You know, I would go in there and I would do my little bit part, and it was a blast. In fact, I met Wayne Gretzky at one of the LA Kings games back in the day, and it was really cool. And then, you know, being able to work with him later on was amazing. I worked on the Bill and Ted Excellent Adventure cartoon. You know, when Keanu Reeves and the other actor, who was a pretty big director now, I can't think of his name, they had a cartoon series. So yeah, I was doing voiceovers in the late 80s, early 90s. I was doing stuff with Hanna-Barbera, which is no longer around, but they were a major studio doing a lot of cartoons back in the day, and they go all the way back, you know, many, many decades before the 80s. And yeah, I was very fortunate. You know, I loved it. It was a ton of fun, and I was kind of working on camera and doing voiceover at the same time.
Yeah. And I mean, I think about this too, Justin, that when you get to be a voice actor, the best part about it is you don't have to really worry about makeup. You don't have to worry about how your hair is. You could come do it in sweatpants if you want. So, I mean, like, it seems like to me as an actor, a lot of times, while there's always stress because you want to be at your very best, there's less stress when you're doing voice acting, because you can just kind of be behind the mic and you're just playing a voice, and you just have to make sure that people believe that character, the voice behind that character.
Absolutely. You're right on a lot of that, where you don't have to go through hair and makeup and wardrobe and all those aspects. But, you know, one of the big things about voiceover is you're a voiceover actor. So a lot of times people think, well, they have a good voice, they could just do voiceover. But the main thing that they're missing is the actor part of voiceover actor. So you really need to know how to bring emotions and ideas to this character. You have to think about the motivation of what the character is trying to get out of the scene. And so there's a lot of acting skills that go into voiceover. And that's why you see a lot of wonderful actors who are fabulous at voiceover as well. But yes, there is a great thing of just like being able to come on and do this podcast interview with you. You know, I don't have to sit through hair and makeup or wardrobe. We just come on and do it. With voiceover, obviously, there's preparation that you have to create, but there's none of the kind of accoutrements that come with being an on-camera actor. But I love both of them.
Right. 1991, Justin, your big break really came in TV, and it was disappointing that this show didn't last as long as it should have. I think it was maybe 20 episodes. It was Eerie, Indiana, which I really enjoyed. Just talk about that experience, because even though that show didn't last, to this day, people still talk about that show. There's people that talk about it on Facebook, social media. So even though it was short-lived, it's had a long-running effect on many fans.
Thank you, Mike. Yeah, absolutely. I have to say, of all the series that I worked on, Eerie Indiana was my absolute favorite. Up until that point, I had done guest spots, I had done commercials, some voiceover, some reoccurring on shows. But this was my, as you said, my big break, where I was the series regular in every episode of the show. And to actually just book the part was quite a journey. I had 12 auditions until I went to the final callback, which is called Network. And that's where you meet with all the executives from, at that time, NBC. You walk into this big room, there's like 20 executives sitting there, and you have to read the part, and it's definitely intimidating. And you're up against like one or two other people. It's kind of like the last audition before they determine whether you get the part. And so I went to Network, and then my agent called a couple days later and said that they weren't sure, and they were going to start re-auditioning for the part again. So I was like, well, okay, I guess I didn't get it. And then a month later, my agent calls and says, they've brought in some new kids and they want you to go and re-audition at Network again. So then I had to go to Network again, and I finally got the part. So I had to go to Network twice, which is kind of unheard of. So it was definitely a huge journey to get to that part. But working on that set day in and day out, with that cast, with Joe Dante as the director, Carl Schaefer as the creator, along with Jose Rivera, who were amazing writer creators who were pretty young at the time. I would say like mid to late 30s, which is pretty youthful to have created such an amazing show. The series was way ahead of its time. It just, those two writers loved sci-fi from the 50s and the 60s, and they brought a lot of those elements to Eerie, Indiana. Working with Omri Katz, who is still a great friend of mine, was amazing. We had an incredible bond and friendship. Jason Marsden, who came on kind of halfway through the season, we're still close. He's a wonderful actor. And then we just had such incredible guest stars. Every week there'd be just these brilliant character actors who would come on. John Astin, who obviously from Addams Family and so many other movies and series, and just so many great. Ray Walston, who I then later got to work on Picket Fences, who came from my favorite Martian in the 50s. So there was all of these wonderful character actors who would come in to the series that we got to work with. And then each episode was like a kid's, just wild stuff that you couldn't even imagine, but would just be the coolest experience ever. One of our friends wore braces and he could communicate with dogs. We went in one episode to the Lost World where, when you lose that one sock, which we all do, or that thing in your house, you can't figure out where it went to the Lost World. Or, my favorite episode was ATM Heart of Gold, where the ATM machine would spit out money. And, I had a relationship with the ATM machine, and then I became like the big man on campus where I could, I was able to buy friends and buy shoes, and I became super cool, and I got to ride around in a limousine. But of course, the moral of the story was, these friends just only cared about me because of the money I was able to buy them with. And at the end of the episode, when the money stopped, they all ran away. But my true friend, Marshall, always stuck by my side. So there were great morals in every episode, amazing adventures that we went on. We had this super cool, hideout that we went to where we put our clues to figure out what was happening that was going on in the town. That was super weird and eerie. Elvis lived in the town. Bigfoot lived in the town. So yeah, I just loved it. The show was way ahead of its time. I mean, it's, a lot of creators from series like, many series, Stranger Things were inspired by Eerie, Indiana. I can't even think of the names, but I would say probably 20 to 30 very successful series that have come on since then have been inspired by Eerie, Indiana. The creators of those shows, the writers of those shows. It was really X-Files for kids. It was, Twin Peaks for kids. And at the time, the network had a shakeup and they fired the president and a new president came in. And Eerie, Indiana was loved by critics, but it just hadn't garnered the audience that it needed. Shows take time. They take a few seasons to develop an audience. And so they canned the show, which is super unfortunate. I mean, nowadays with social media, Eerie, Indiana would be on for 20 seasons. And they also put us in a terrible time slot. We were up against 60 Minutes at the time, which at that time, 60 Minutes was the number one series in the world. It just crushed. And so we were at a bad time slot. We weren't given a lot of love by the network, and then the network shakeup happened. But still, I just love working on the show, love talking to fans about it. It's so great hearing that, they grew up with the show, they loved it, and they're even sharing it with their kids now.
Yeah, and Justin, I mean, we're going to get to more of your stuff, but you've been on like some very big cult followings when you think about it. And it started with Eerie, Indiana. And it's funny you mentioned Jason before. I was talking to you about how the 90s was a great time for kids being actors and stuff. And he was in a lot of stuff, Boy Meets World, Step by Step. So I felt like the 90s just benefited so many teenage kids with opportunities to act. And guys like yourself and Jason are proof of that because you guys seem to be everywhere in the 90s.
Yeah, you're right. Jason did a ton of stuff. He's a wonderful actor, super talented. And yeah, we were able to work a ton on, different series and different projects. And it was awesome. It was a wonderful time, super fun, just being able to work as an actor and go to sets and meet other actors and work with incredible crews and just work with other creative people is the most fun you can ever have.
Right. Justin, for kids who identify you as Harold on Hey Arnold, and for people who, see more of your latest work, they kind of, they're missing out because Picket Fences to me, talk about the writing. For you as an actor, I mean, they gave you some of the best writing ever. And I was waiting today to tell you this story, but really how I started watching Picket Fences is I was a young kid, and my mother was such a fan of the movie Steel Magnolias. And my favorite character in that movie was the guy who was Tom Skerritt's character, Drum Eatonton. And I just happened to see that he was on the show Picket Fences. So I just wanted to see, being a high school kid, I wanted to see him in something else. So I watched an episode of Picket Fences. But ironically, the first episode I watched was when your character, Matthew Brock, gets shot by his good friend because him and his brother Zach did something to the kid's brother. I think it was like something like a paint gun or whatever. And
potato gun.
Potato gun, and his car wiped out. And I just remember, like, I went from wanting to see Tom Skerritt to just being so into that episode. And I'm kind of thankful that I watched Steel Magnolias, because I would have probably never watched Picket Fences. But I got to tell you, Justin, what a show that was. And I mean, even on your first episode ever, I'll never forget you and Adam, both you guys get in trouble in school because you get in a fight with some bullies. So right away, like, I just felt like the writing was so well done on that show, and it deserved so much more than 4 seasons. But just talk to me a little bit about how Picket Fences came about.
Absolutely. No, thank you, Mike, for all the kudos and for watching the show. And you were way ahead of your time because, it was a very adult-oriented show, and you in high school watching the show on a Friday night just shows that, you were heads and shoulders above pretty much everybody else. It was a brilliant show. I mean, obviously, David Kelly wrote the show. David is one of the most prolific creators on television. Subsequent to Picket Fences, he did Ally McBeal. He did The Practice. He's done a proliferation of shows. Big Little Lies with Reese Witherspoon and Nicole Kidman. I mean, just so many incredible shows. He's a brilliant, brilliant writer. And Picket Fences was really the first show that he had created on his own. He had come from Law and Order, where he was a part of the writing staff, which was a Stephen Bochco show, who also was a very prolific producer, creator at the time. But yeah, David was an amazing writer and just kind of had a very eccentric mind. And what I had done was I was coming off of Eerie, Indiana, and Eerie, Indiana had not been picked up. We were hoping it was going to get picked up for a second season. It was kind of, but then we found out it wasn't. And then I went to go and audition for David, and he really liked me. I think he had been a fan of Eerie, Indiana as well, because he kind of liked that eerie, eccentric type of show himself. And then I was able to work on the show and book the part of Matthew Brock. And working with Tom, we talked a little bit earlier about, working on incredible sets. It starts from the top down. And Tom Skerritt obviously was a famous actor. I mean, he'd come from Top Gun and Steel Magnolias and, River
Runs in MASH. Yep.
In MASH, and River Runs Through It, and, many, many, many series and films. And, he was a brilliant actor, but just a wonderful person. I mean, on set, he would hug everybody from the cast to the crew. And it was he set the tone for how the set was going to be. And then, of course, Kathy Baker, who played my mom, was a wonderful actress, still a wonderful actress. And she was just such a warm, loving, incredible actress, and kind of was like a second mom to me. So it was just an awesome set, really great set with fabulous writing. And they gave my character, Matthew, a lot of juicy roles, a lot of stuff to really dive into. As you said, Mike, the first episode you saw happened to be the episode where I got shot. I still remember vividly shooting that scene in the school because I was very afraid of guns, obviously, as a kid. Although, some kids grow up hunting and are used to them, but I was not. I grew up as an actor in LA, so I'd never held a gun before. And I remember them pointing it at me. And I said to, the individual that was kind of responsible, I was like, I just want to make sure it's not loaded, and please make sure they don't point the gun at me. And they gave me the gun to hold. And I remember holding the gun and thinking, geez, this is really heavy. It's a lot heavier than I thought. I could see why this can cause serious damage. But yeah, I remember we shot that scene, no pun intended, was shot. We filmed it, and it was just a great episode. It was just a really wonderful episode. And I got to really sink my teeth into that part and go through a lot of emotional moments. And there was a lot of dynamic elements in that episode. And it was just great. It was a great set to work on. We worked at 20th Century Fox right there in Century City. And it was just like a family experience.
Yeah, and interestingly enough about that episode too, what I remember is, again, this kid, he's trying to avenge his brother getting hurt. He's not thinking, obviously. I mean, he found the gun, but he's still a kid in the sense where after that it all happened, and Matthew went to go visit him in the jail cell, and he says to him, "If I get out, are you going to shoot me?" And like right there, like that's just something a kid would say at that age. So like he still was a kid, and what they taught you was in those type of shows, which I really like with the writing, is that sometimes kids and adults as well, they do things they probably don't mean, but when you do something like that, there's no going back to it. I mean, it messes up your life. And I just felt like the writing was so well done, Justin. And, you talked about Kathy Baker, one of my favorite episodes. And I remember I was so mad at her character, Jill, in the beginning, is when Matthew accidentally hits Zach with the car, and she just wails on Matthew. And you really start to see that Matthew feels like his mother, loves the other two children more than him. And he goes through all these emotions. But the end of the episode, you see them, they're playing checkers, I think, or something upstairs, or video games, whatever it was. So like things like that emotion that show had was just tremendous.
You're right. Mike, you gave me chills. I remember shooting that scene where Kathy comes into my room and she hits me across my face. And that was such a deeply emotional moment. And of course, my character, just hated her, resented her, and was so furious. And it was so real. It really felt real. I remember the director of that episode, Oz Scott, who's a wonderful director, and we're still close. And Kathy actually ended up winning an Emmy for that specific episode. She was brilliant in that episode. And, she had a child herself. And I think she had 2 kids at that time, or one a little bit after that. So, it was, I don't think she wanted to hit me. I think she struggled with that as an actress. She kind of was against doing that, but she realized that it was an important part of her character to go through that. And it was a big struggle between her and I as characters and what we were going through. And it was an amazing episode. I mean, you just don't see that on television. I don't even know if you see that now, but you definitely did not see that then. And it was real. It was very real and authentic. And I think, again, as you said, Mike, it goes all back to the writing, which was sensational.
Yeah. And I mean, I think about so many episodes where they implemented both comedy and drama into the episode. I mean, every character they had on there, they always stood out. Like I always laugh at the Carter character. I mean, he always wanted to be deputized, like every time something happened. And then the courtroom, Five-ish Fingal was just tremendous. I mean, you want to talk about a tremendous actor. He was just wonderful. And Ray Walston played the perfect counter to him, the whole show, like in general, and the kids yourself, Adam and Holly. I mean, the job that you three did to make that work was so dynamic, especially yourself and Adam, when you had to kind of play a very dark part with the character that was playing Holly's mother on the show, and you both resented her, and I think one of you tells her, "I hope you die" or whatever. So like they weren't afraid to give kids really intense writing in those episodes.
You're right, Mike. You're absolutely right. They gave us a lot to chew on and a lot to perform. And, we weren't just throwaway characters that were just there in the background. We had, juicy parts and, episodes that were built around us that were very real, what kids deal with their parents and their family dynamic. And it was amazing. And, you brought up Five-ish and Ray, 2 of my favorite actors. I used to go sit in the courtroom when I would sit like in the jury box and just watch them when they would battle it out. Ray as the judge and Five-ish as the lawyer, and they would battle each other out in their acting scenes. And they were brilliant. They were so funny, so wonderful. I used to sit on Fridays, they would cater lunch. And because we would typically shoot late on Friday evening, and so we wouldn't be able to be home and watch the show on television. It came out at 10 o'clock at night, Fridays on CBS. So we would watch it during lunch. They would air the episode for us, and we'd all sit together and eat lunch together, the whole cast and crew. And I would sit between Five-ish and Ray, and they would tell jokes the entire time. They would rip on each other, they would make fun of each other, and they would tell jokes, and I would laugh the entire time. So I wasn't able to really watch the episode because the episode would be on, but I'd be laughing the whole time between these two just brilliant character actors. And as you said, Five-ish, what a brilliant actor. He had been in the Yiddish theater in New York for 50 years doing theater until we finally started doing television. And Ray, working on television from the 50s on in movies. These were giants of being actors. They just could take these parts that David wrote for them and just break them down and tear them apart and just chew on the fat and bring these characters to life in a way that I don't think any other actors could have. They really just did amazing performances.
They really did. And one episode that stood out to me too, Justin, and I don't know if you're going to remember it because I don't think you had a lot of scenes in it, but it made me realize, and when I saw like how they did the verdict with the O.J. Simpson trial, I thought of this episode because it's an episode where Jimmy's character, he has to be on, or Tom's character, Jimmy, has to be on the jury. And they are trying to see if this one guy is guilty. They show a video and he shoots two cops because he thinks they're going to shoot him. And they're arguing back and forth. And the whole point of why he got found not guilty was because there was reasonable doubt. And I remember watching that episode and I'm like, that would never happen in real life. This guy would have been found guilty. But really, after when I saw what happened with the O.J. Simpson trial, something so similar to that episode occurred. I said to myself, God, David Kelly, he really is a genius because he wrote that before that situation with the O.J. trial ever happened.
You're right. You're absolutely right. Well, I don't know if you know, but David also was a lawyer. He had gone to law school and he had practiced law, I don't know for how many years, maybe 5 or 6 years before he had started writing for Law and Order. I think he had submitted a script to Stephen Bochco, like a spec script, and Stephen liked it and then brought him on the writing staff of Law and Order. So David, I think that's why he was able to write such compelling and amazing courtroom scenes, because obviously he was a lawyer. He had dealt with that himself and really understood the intricacies of it. And as you mentioned, could dive into an incredible story and be able to showcase reasonable doubt. And that's why, the defendant was found not guilty. And that was obviously reflective of what transpired later in some of the most famous real jury trials that we've ever seen.
Yeah, like even I forget his name, but the guy, Robert Blake with Beretta. Reasonable doubt got him off. And that Picket Fences episode really made me realize that just because somebody may seem completely guilty to you, if they could show reasonable doubt, then they have no choice but to find the person not guilty. But Justin, I wanted to ask you this. This kind of always bothered me. Now, this last episode of Picket Fences was done in necessity. I don't think they ever intended it to be the series finale. Mm-hmm. But your character was missing in that episode, and I never could understand why. I'm looking at the photo they take of the whole cast, and you see Adam, you see Holly, and we're missing Matthew. What happened there?
That's a great question. Talk about a little trivia that you uncovered a little nugget. So when I was doing Picket Fences, I was also going to regular school, so that when you're doing an hour drama like what Picket Fences was, you don't have to be on set every day. You're only on set the days of the week that you're actually working. And the set was, when you do a sitcom, it's a 5-day shoot. Monday to Friday is one episode. And then episode 2 begins the next Monday, and that's Monday to Friday. But with a drama, it's 7 days. So you go Monday to Friday, and then that's 5 days. You wouldn't shoot on the weekend. And then Monday and Tuesday would be still finishing episode 1. And then Wednesday would start episode 2, and you'd go 7 days from that. And then episode 3 and so forth. So the days that I was on set, which were typically out of a 7-day shoot, I might be on set 3 days, depending on how much of the episode I was in, right? If I had a really big part, I might be in 6 days. If I had a small part in the episode, I might only be in 2 days. So those days that I was on set, I had a tutor on set, and I would do my schooling on set, and then I would perform. The other days I wasn't on set, I was in regular school, and I loved going to regular school. My friends at school, I was playing sports, and I just really liked kind of that experience. And I was also taking French. So I was in French class, and I had done like 3 years of French. And at the end of the school year, there was the opportunity with our French class to go to France for 2 weeks and to stay with a family. And then we would stay with a family with a French kid kind of our age and their parents. And then a couple weeks after that, they would come to Los Angeles and stay with us. So it was an exchange program. And that exchange program happened to be during the last episode of Picket Fences. And I really wanted to go to France. And it wasn't something that they could move. It was scheduled when it was scheduled. And the last episode was scheduled when it was scheduled. So, fortunately, my mom, who was just a great manager for me and really wanted me to focus on education and be a real kid along with being an actor, said, hey, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity to go to France. And I was like, yeah. So that's what I chose. I chose to go to France and stay with a family for 2 weeks and be with my schoolmates. And it was an amazing experience, and I wouldn't change it for the world. And of course, it was a bummer to miss the last episode of Picket Fences. But again, we didn't know it was the last episode. We hoped we would get another season, but it just happened to be the last episode. So that's why I wasn't in it. And the producers on Picket Fences were not happy. They wanted me to be in that last episode. But I wanted to be a real kid. And in the end, looking back on that, I think I absolutely made the right choice. I still have incredible fond memories of, that trip to France, being with that family, learning so much, being able to practice my French. It was one of those, once in a lifetime experiences. Missing the last episode of Picket Fences wasn't as important to me as my education and being and enjoying that kind of experience.
That makes me feel better though, Justin, because I always wondered if they just decided not to have you in the episode, because I've seen so many shows where they write a kid out and they never tell you what happened to him or her again. And, we were talking about Family Matters earlier, me and you, and I just hated how the one daughter, they just wrote her out after 4 seasons. I thought that was so unfair to her. So that makes me feel better. But I got to tell you, Justin, it took me a long time to forgive CBS. I would not watch a show on CBS because I could never understand why they canceled the show. I mean, you got to remember, whenever you're on a Friday night, your ratings are only going to be as good as they could be. But I felt like they were winning their time slot for the most part. And the other thing is the show was still good. I mean, if you watched it every week, you saw just riveting TV. So I was very upset when they canceled it. I felt like Picket Fences deserved more of a life than it got.
I agree, Mike. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I know everybody would really appreciate you saying that. And we totally agreed. I mean, the show always held up. It was telling compelling stories. It was amazing. It was a fabulous cast and crew. And we were hoping to get many more seasons. The critics loved the show. We won a ton of Emmys, a lot of Golden Globes. We won a lot of SAG awards. And as you said,
I think you won about 3 Young Artist Awards as well.
Yeah, I won a lot of Young Artist Awards, and we won Best Show a couple times. We won, Best Actor and Actress for many of the cast. We won Best Ensemble. There were so many awards that the show was given, and as you said, Friday night at 10 o'clock, it's a terrible time slot. Most people are out; they're having dinner with their loved ones. They're out at a party, whatever it may be. It's a bad time slot to begin with. And, we did the best we could at that time slot, but we were telling amazing television and amazing stories. And yeah, I felt like the show had several more years that we could have been on, but at the end of the day, we're not the decision makers. I wish we were.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, that theme song is one of the best ever. I mean, if you can't get pumped up for that theme song, that alone makes you want to watch every episode. I mean, just a great theme song. Let me ask you this, Justin. You seem like you had such a great bond with Holly and Adam. Do you still keep in touch with them? Because I would hope that you guys from time to time are able to text one another, because I really felt like you 3 were like real brothers and sisters. I really did.
Thank you, Mike. Yeah, Adam and I are super close. We see each other. We work together on voiceover every now and then. We talk all the time. We text all the time. We're buddies. We've been in communication since Picket, and we even worked on Hey Arnold together. He played Curly for a little bit of the show, where I played Harold. So we overlapped on a couple projects as well. So we've been close. Holly and us, we haven't really kept in communication. We wish we had. We haven't really been in touch. Remember at the time, she was a few years older than us. And as a kid, that's a big difference, right? As an adult, a few years, even 10 years is not that big of a deal. But when you're, I think she was 17 and we were, Adam was like maybe 11, 12, and I was like 13, 14. So we were kind of closer in age, and we were also in the same, when we were on school together, we would be on set together doing schoolwork for 3 hours a day. So we were pretty close. And then a lot of our scenes were together, and Holly was done with school and she was older. She was kind of at the edge of being a teenager. And that's a pretty big separation, just in terms of mindset and who you are as a person at that age. So we didn't stay close. I wish we had, but she's, had a wonderful career, and I wish her nothing but the best.
And let me ask you this, Justin, before we move on to Hey Arnold. If you had to, you're like a guy who is a talented writer, you're a talented actor, things like that. What do you think the Brock family would be doing right now in 2025, if you had to guess? Like, where would all of them be?
That's a great question. I haven't even thought about that. I think that, I believe that Jimmy, Tom would most likely be the mayor. And, Kathy, Jill, she would still be the doctor of the town. Who knows? She might even be a senator. She was such a brilliant woman. She could be a senator or a congresswoman. And I think that, Matthew, he was a mischievous kid. And I think that he probably would have gone on to be a lawyer, maybe a criminal defense lawyer, similar to Wamba. And they would, Matthew would have his whole family, a family of his own, and Adam would have a family, and Holly would have a family. So I think they're, one of them would stay in law enforcement, and you'd kind of see their families just grow and really become closer. In a sense, you could almost look at a show like Blue Bloods, and see that Picket Fences, as we grew up, could kind of grow into a little bit of that law enforcement, and legal type of family that would stay very close, but also still, we could have pushed it into a bit of a weirder element, right? The show was weird. I mean, an elephant gave birth, right? There were strange things that happened in the town. And now they're even, you can push the element with television even more that you could back then. There was no Netflix or Apple TV, or, there wasn't that same element. So I could see the show being pushed into a little bit of a weirder side as well. Who knows? Maybe there's an alien in town. Maybe aliens have taken over Rome, Wisconsin. And who knows? Maybe we're living on Mars, right? Elon Musk wants to terraform Mars and turn it into Earth. Who knows? Maybe the whole cast of Picket Fences is now living on Mars. So there could be all sorts of different strange, weird directions that the show took. But I'd have to kind of sit down and spend a lot of time on where the show would go. But it would be a blast. I wish we were on now.
Yeah, I definitely do as well. And I still get bothered. You guys deserved a better ending than forced last episode. But Justin, usually a lot of times what happens is, I know Ken Osmond in the past had said that he had trouble finding work because people couldn't look at him any other way but Eddie Haskell. As soon as Picket Fences ended for you, you were working right away. You were doing Hey Arnold. I think you did 10 seasons of that, which is just amazing. So talk about how Hey Arnold came about and how enjoyable has that been? Because listen, kids everywhere, they know who Harold is and they love Harold. So
thank you. Yeah, Hey Arnold came about. I remember auditioning for the part for Craig Bartlett was the creator of the show, another amazing writer. And I got there and he gave me a script and he gave me a drawing of what Harold looked like. And I thought, Harold kind of reminds me of the bullies that were in my school. And I just thought of the bullies and kind of lowered my voice and just kind of took on the personality traits of I had been bullied. I mean, a lot of us were bullied. So I just thought of like what that bully character was like, and the character's voice and the personality came to life. And then, fortunately I was able to book the part, and working on that show was incredible. We had such an amazing cast. We would all get together at the studio and we'd read the script from top to bottom. And we were typically there for about 4 hours, all of us actors, all of us kid actors, and even the adult actors. We'd read the script from top to bottom. We'd make notes. We'd get ideas from Craig and the other writers. And then we would record the second version of reading the script, which obviously then they turn into the actual series of that episode. And it was awesome. I mean, it was so fun. It was just amazing to play Harold. I was able to infuse a lot of kind of improv into the character, really bring a lot of his personality to life. And as the show develops season after season, more of him comes to life, and we start to uncover, yeah, he's a bully, but he also has a soft side. And what is he covering up? He's covering up a lot of his insecurities, but he also was a lovable bully. They gave Harold a lot of juicy characters and a lot of juicy parts to play, and definitely one of my favorite characters I was ever able to play, and a big part of kids' childhoods who grew up in the 90s, and it was awesome to be part of that.
Yeah, and I mean, it definitely is a show that to this day, I mean, kids still watch, and it's on somewhere in the world today, right now. But the other thing is, too, is while you played Harold, you also lent your voice for different characters at times on that show. So Harold is the one you're most famous for, but there were times you had to play a couple different characters. So that has to, that's the other thing, too. It's one thing to play one character voice the entire time, but when you have to kind of change your voice, that's the beauty of being a great voice actor.
You're right. Absolutely. Whenever you do a cartoon, usually you're doing 2 or 3 voices. You're doing your main voice, and then you're doing kind of some ancillary voices, even if it's just kids in a crowd. You're participating in that aspect, or you're playing, a bit part or something in the episode of a different type of character. Maybe he's a surfer dude, or he's a hot dog salesman, or, whatever it may be. And so that's just kind of the beauty, as you mentioned, of doing voiceovers. You can kind of change your voice and play different characters.
Yeah. And I mean, it has to be a lot of fun for you. And, another series you did, I think this was 4 or 5 seasons as well, is Lloyd in Space. I mean, talk about that, because again, I mean, here's the thing, Justin. Voice actors, sometimes they might do one guest spot on a cartoon and they do so many of them, they could be on so many. But when you're on series and they're lasting for over 3 years, because nowadays we all know when it comes to cartoons, 3 years is a long time for a cartoon series. So when you're doing like Hey Arnold, which was, like I said, 8 to 10 years, and Lloyd in Space is like 4 or 5, that like you're making an impact with voice acting, because people are watching the show. They have to believe your voice with that character.
Yeah, thank you. No, Lloyd in Space, love working on that. Again, we had an amazing cast. That was a show created by Paul and Joe, Paul Germain and Joe Anselberry, who are fabulous writers and directors. And they were part of Rugrats. They were 90s gods from my standpoint in terms of the cartoon world. They were just sensational, talented creator, writer, directors. Love those guys. And it was fun playing Eddie. Eddie was the mischievous sidekick to Lloyd, and he was always kind of pushing Lloyd to do things, and it was a ton of fun. In fact, on that show, I got to work with the future Patrick from SpongeBob, right? He was on the show, and I remember when we were wrapping up Lloyd in Space, we were all talking, what are you up to next? What are you working on? And I remember him telling me that he was going to go work on a pilot for Nickelodeon Sponge something. He couldn't remember the name. And, 20 plus years later, he's still playing Patrick. Which is awesome. But yeah, no, I mean, being able to be in kids' households every week with Lloyd in Space and telling those great stories and wonderful, fun adventures was a blast, and really a gift to be able to be part of it.
And it's funny you mentioned Bill playing Patrick. He was on a great show called Coach. And I mean, his character Dauber was hysterical. And it's funny because people that know SpongeBob so well, they're always going to identify him with Patrick. But that show, Coach, he was just as funny in that show. So, that's what's the beauty of what yourself and Bill and so many people are doing today, because a lot of us will identify you, like I said, with Picket Fences, Eerie Indiana, but so many people in this generation, Lloyd in Space, Hey Arnold. I mean, that's got to be a great feeling for you, because different generations of fans know who you are, and it doesn't matter where they know you from.
Thank you, Mike. No, that's a gift to be able to cross over different generations and have parents and kids, remember you from different things, and it's just fun. It's wonderful to be able to work as an actor, and it's truly a blessing. And as you mentioned, different generations. I work on a wonderful show now called Spidey and His Amazing Friends, which is on Disney Plus, and we've been on for numerous seasons, and I play Rhino. Hey, Spidey, don't take all my gold. It's Rhino. I got the gold. And it's awesome playing Rhino. Rhino is so much fun to play. The writers are amazing on that show, and it's an incredible cast. And, there are a lot of folks who kind of grew up watching Hey Arnold and know me from being Harold or Eerie Indiana, and now they have little kids, and their little kids love Spidey and His Amazing Friends, and they know me as Rhino. And so that's really neat.
And I think about this, Justin, as you were just doing Rhino's voice. I mean, I'm sure at times playing, like having them do your voice like that and stuff, sometimes your voice must get sore afterwards. I mean, I would think it would, correct? Because I mean, it's not easy to disguise your voice, and not because I know if I disguise my voice, sometimes you do feel it in your throat sometimes.
Oh, sure. You definitely feel it, without a doubt. That's kind of part of being a voiceover actor is, you feel the effects sometimes if you add gravel to your voice or you deepen your voice or elements of that. But that's why we always want to make sure we take care of our voice, tea and honey, and just really, protect our voice as much as possible, and drink water. And even while we're doing the part, we're typically drinking water or hot tea and then recovering after we do it. Absolutely.
And I know there's another generation of fans that love Gelman, and you played that on Recess, which was another popular show. I mean, very popular. And I mean, you've done so many, I want to say, iconic cartoons, because Nickelodeon, Disney, all these types of networks that produce these cartoons. I mean, you really are a part of a piece of cartoon history that will live on forever.
Thank you, Mike. No, it's been wonderful working for Nickelodeon, working for Disney. Back in the day, working for Hanna-Barbera. I've really been blessed to work for almost all the studios and the networks, and it's a joy. It's a real joy to be able to work and do this. In fact, right after we're wrapped, I've got to audition for a pretty cool cartoon that's coming out. So we're always auditioning and looking for new work and always working. It's just part of the business.
Right. And, I think what people might forget sometimes too, Justin, is you still do get in front of the camera. You do voiceover work, but you still get in front of the camera as well. I mean, is there one you enjoy more than the other? I'm sure you just love them both equally when you're able to do them.
As you said, I love them both. I mean, they both are very different. When you're working in front of the camera, you obviously have wardrobe, you have hair and makeup, and you're on set, and that's a totally different experience versus being in a kind of a dark sound booth and you're recording voiceover for a cartoon. They both have their pros, and I love them both. I love doing on-camera acting as well. I did a series, and I shot a pilot recently, and I write, and I'm always looking to create more content and more stuff to work with friends and be in television shows and films, and and love doing voiceover. So as actors, we kind of we have the opportunity to do a multitude of things within the arts, and they all have their pros.
Yeah, they definitely do. And I'm a big Yankees fan. So one of the shows you've been doing recently that I really enjoy, of course, you play Coach Bud, and that's Bronx Buds. I mean, how fun has that been? Because that's really a great concept, and that's great writing as well.
Thank you, Mike. Well, the great thing about Bronx Buds is I created the show. So I write the episodes, I direct the episodes, and with my partner, and I get to play Coach Bud, who's a blast of a character. He's he thinks he's a knows everything about being the best coach in baseball. Aaron Boone, but on steroids to some degree. And it's been a blast to work on Bronx Buds with, the Yankees Entertainment Sports Network for Yankees fans. It airs on both. Some of the episodes air on the Yes Network in New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. And then you can also find the show on the Gotham Sports app, which you can download everywhere. And it's been awesome. We just wrapped up season 2, and fingers crossed for season 3. Just loving working on the show.
Yeah, I really love it. And like I said, being a Yankees fan, I mean, it's nice to watch something where you're not stressed, because when you watch the Yankees, sometimes they could stress you out.
No kidding. Talk about the game last night. Incredibly stressful. So
exactly. Well, let's hope they win tonight, or else,
yes.
it's going to be another year of letting the Red Sox fans have the last laugh. But Justin, I wanted to ask you this before we go. What has been in your mind? It's hard to answer this, but what has been most rewarding about your career?
That's a tough question. I don't think I've received that one before. The most rewarding part of my career, I guess, has most likely been the other wonderfully talented creative folks that I've been blessed to work with, from other actors who I've learned a ton from, going back to Tom Skerritt, Kathy Baker, Fivish Finkel, Ray Walston, even work with Don Cheadle on Picket Fences, to sensational directors who have gifted me with, so many wonderful ideas, from, Oz Scott, who directed that episode we talked about earlier, where, Kathy, my mom on the show, hit me across the face, and we had this really emotionally deep scene and deep episode, to the wonderful writers, David Kelly, and the fabulous crew, from, the wonderful folks who were in the props department, to hair and makeup, to wardrobe, to transportation. When you create a television show, when you work on a television show, you really, it's a family that comes together, especially when you're on multiple seasons. And I've been blessed to work on shows, as you mentioned, from cartoons to on-camera series, for multiple seasons. And it takes everybody to come together to bring their best, to elevate that show that then is on television that people can watch. It's not just one individual, it's a team. It's a whole team. And you speak of Bronx Buds, right? You speak of the Yankees. That's a team that wins together. It's not just one individual. So to be part of this team effort of creative folks, of collaborators, who come together and create something magical, as one, we all come together and create this magical piece. That's been, I think, the most rewarding aspect of being an actor, and having a career that's spanned multiple decades.
Well, Justin, I want to thank you for giving me some time today. Again, I've been a fan, like I said, since early '92, and I've always wanted to get you on, and I was determined to make that happen. And it was one of the highlights of my career. So I really appreciate you giving me some time today. And thank you for all the years you've given myself and so many fans around the world all these great memories, because we really do appreciate it.
Thank you, Mike. It's been an awesome chatting with you. I loved your questions. Really fun to dive in deep into, some of the shows I worked on in the past, and talk about the cast and the crew, and the decades and the nostalgia of that. And it's been fun. It's been great chatting with you. Love your show, and thanks for having me on.
Thank you. And folks, I got to tell you right now, I got to see this young man in early 1992, like I told you. The first episode I ever saw, I think he stood out the most to me, where I said, wow, this kid's a tremendous actor. And he never disappointed. In the 4 seasons on Picket Fences, I saw so many moments from him, and great acting, and he really showed you how talented he was as an actor. But look what he's done throughout his career. I mean, he continues to work and has never stopped. He's been in so many different things, whether it's being a writer, a producer, a director, a voice actor. And every time he does something, he gives you his very best. He gives 150%, so you can enjoy the type of work that they put out there. That says a lot, not only about Justin Shenkarow, the actor, but also Justin Shenkarow, the person. And as an actor in person, he's simply the best. For In the Spotlight, I'm Mike Kenichi saying goodbye, everyone.